Fourscore and, well, a year ago, I made a beginner's diplomacy guide for Supreme Ruler Ultimate here, where I went over the basics of how diplomacy works, how every treaty works, and how you can interact with the system in general. I only lightly touched on sphere diplomacy because sphere diplomacy is notably different than the base diplomacy in the game, even though the treaties still mean the same things and do the same things. The main way that sphere diplomacy differs is that the world is now essentially split between two different sides. Each of these sides have a predetermined leader depending on what scenario you're in, what era. In the Cold War era, the sphere leader at the start for blue is America, and blue is called NATO. Red is called Warsaw Pact, and the leader is the Soviet Union. After the main leaders die, there are secondary leaders that can then take over, quote unquote, but there is no indication of these leaders even existing necessarily when you're in the game, and no indication of the leaders changing when one leader dies. All these values need to be discovered by yourself in the game's files because they are unfortunately not listed anywhere, which is dumb. In addition to having the spheres, you have neutral countries which are not leaning towards or aligned to either side. And this is important because diplomacy and how easy it is to get certain treaties has been completely changed in the sphere diplomacy system compared to the base diplomacy system. In the base diplomacy system, I talked about how important how a country feels about you is, and it's still important here, but now there's another layer, another restriction between interacting that you're going to have to account for, and that is the leaning, which as you can see is represented either by a dark blue circle around a star indicating that they're aligned with you, or a light blue circle, or red if you're on the red side if they're leaning towards you. You can also see the total amount of these countries on either leaning, aligned, or non-aligned here. Non-aligned means they're really not going to be interested in making any treaties with you at all. For example, and this isn't the best example, but Switzerland, it pretty much likes us. They're good friends with us. So you think, oh, well, maybe we can get the friendship treaties. The bare bones treaties that in the base diplomacy system are what you want to go for first to get them to like you more, to start them gravitating towards you, and maybe even bribing them to push your relations along. Yeah, it doesn't work like that anymore. There are no friendship treaties anymore. There's just alignment. And so alignment is going to be controlled by a number of factors. First, you're going to want to find someone you want to move towards you. This is if you're targeting. But you can also just try to move a whole region, but that's going to take a lot of targeting first. Other than just looking at all the stars over the map and trying to figure out who everyone is like that, you can just go into the regional atlas here and you can sort by sphere alignment. Get rid of those pesky colonies. And as we can see here, we can see everyone's aligned with us, leaning towards us, neutral, leaning towards the enemy, and just fully red. You'll need to interact with them as if you have to bribe them or just completely get on your knees and beg for them to ever join you, because unless someone is fully aligned with you, you're not very likely to get any treaties. So you're gonna have to work, befriend their friends, go to them, support their government, throw a bunch of just free resources, money, texts, you name it at them, especially money, over and over again to make them absolutely love you. Not just their government, but their people. And definitely once they get maxed out, assuming the other side isn't trying to do the same thing, they don't already have some sort of leaning, you should end up with them on your side using methods as I just explained and showed off more in the diplomacy tutorial. But leanings will always be moving in this game, and that's also because there's an influence rating in every theater. Let me show you the theaters here. Every theater has an influence rating. You can only, strangely, see it if you go to strategic targeting, you know, that place where you choose who to nuke. Well, for example, if I go to, where's Europe? Western Europe, we'll see we have 66.1% influence there, but Warsaw has 0. That means there's some neutrals there. This means we just have that much, roughly 2/3 wholehearted NATO-ness, as we can see. NATO-ness, is that a word? It is now. With these fully aligned blues also partially influenced by Spain's partially blue aligned status. The neutrals would make it fall somewhere in the middle, not leaning towards anyone in particular, and there's no Warsaw there. If we go to Central Europe specifically, we'll see it's much different, with Warsaw having 72.7%, NATO having 6.8%. This is influenced just by having countries that are already leaning towards you placed there, and it will influence all the other countries in that region. So for example, if you really want to get like a whole theater to join you, start flipping one country at a time. The more you get to join you, especially in like a mostly neutral region, the more that will passively begin to flip others towards you. There is also a rule where blue always will have a stronger gravitational pull by default than red does. This is just because, as we know, NATO is blue, Warsaw is red, Warsaw was bad, had rebellions all the time. World War II, it's the allies that are blue, the Axis were the red ones. I feel like this system translates the worst into World War I, where the blue was the Entente, and then the Central Powers is red, because it wasn't really good versus evil back then, but that's how the mechanics go. In modern day, it's just like America and their allies versus Russia and their allies again, but without special names. Generally speaking, as more countries go from non-aligned or enemy leaning towards your leaning or aligned, the more your influence will spread in the world, and the more your sphere will begin to take over. You'll only really be able to do deals and most diplomacy with people that are fully aligned already. However, sometimes the AI will offer things. For example, if you get a trade request, especially as the sphere leader from someone that's in your sphere, they are going to probably give you a terrible deal. This is under the premise that you, as a sphere leader, are really powerful, and you're supposed to be helping your less advantaged sphere members with catching up to you and surviving against the enemy. They're like, hey, we're leaning towards you, we're aligned with you, help us out. And then if someone from the other side asks you for a trade, they're actually going to give you a much better deal than your allies ever will, which is exactly the opposite of how it works in the base diplomacy system, which is why it's so confusing. They do this under the idea that, oh, my enemies aren't very likely to help me, so I will go out of my way to make sure that they help me, and they'll send you just deals that are terrible for them, but great for you. Even though, as I said, when a sphere leader is destroyed, it does move down, the sphere leader has the highest influential effect for actions and even just existing. So if, as America, I just make friends with everybody and I try to make friends, I am more likely to get someone to come to my sphere than anybody else. However, if I was France or the UK, I try to do the same thing, my actions wouldn't have as much of an effect of turning someone to my sphere as if I was America. The same thing goes for the USSR versus something like Poland or East Germany. This also goes for driving people away from your sphere. So if America or the USSR goes around warmongering, people are rapidly going to be scared away from your sphere to the other sphere because they're seeking protection from the evil warmonger sphere. However, if West or East Germany go warmongering, that's only going to have really half of the effect as America doing it. This mechanic really encourages, especially in multiplayer, but also with historical events, the use of proxy wars to get what you want, rather than just straight up declaring war on someone. If, when playing sphere diplomacy, you go with the sphere victory option, which I think is really the best way to do any sphere diplomacy anything, your goal is to wipe out the other sphere completely. Not mostly, completely. So generally, you're not gonna get the Soviet Union or America to drift away from their sphere. They're fully aligned to it basically at all times. I won't say it can never happen. I have seen it happen once, but generally you're going to want to have some sort of military action to deal with the main sphere leader while isolating them from their friends. If that cannot be done, ideally you just want to get rid of the sphere leader, because even though a new leader will take over in the sphere, for example, probably the UK, if America is no longer sphere leader, their actions will not be as influential. Their mere existence and lack thereof of America will thus make everybody move closer to the Soviet Union, because they will now have a stronger gravitational pull, because they have a far more influential nation sitting up at the top, and even just being non-aligned will pull others towards it better than the sphere that is now missing its main leader. You do not need to get every aligned country to be on your side, you just need to get rid of the opposite sphere. So long as you, as NATO for example, make sure nobody is leaning or aligned Warsaw Pact, you win the Sphere victory. And this is how Sphere diplomacy works. This is how a Sphere game works. You can take this gameplay style instead of the base diplomacy style on literally any single era. They are set up for every single era, some sort of Sphere setup. It really is a much different gameplay flow, and it completely changes how the diplomacy system of this game works. That's it for today, though. I hope you guys found this guide helpful. I have a large array of guides for this game in a playlist that you can find in the description below. For now, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on another video.